suppose that if you were Pep Guardiola, maybe you might think that can be somebody else's problem. We'll see whether he re-ups his contract.
Maybe he's going to go become the England manager.
Oh God, yeah, of course. Who wouldn't want such a perfect job that's just 100% adulation, zero criticism? God, I mean, can we actually do like a few minutes on this, because the discourse around this is so insane. Look, the British do not, I think, have a very good understanding of their reputation internationally in a bunch of ways. But
like, when where's this going? Because this could be an endless podcast.
but when it comes to the national team, they seem to think, yeah, why wouldn't Klopp? Why wouldn't Pep Guardiola want this job that is something you do a couple of months of the year and doesn't dovetail at all with his preferences as a manager?
No.
And I was thinking how insane the conversation around this was. And then I accidentally waded into the US men's national team conversation, which is even worse somehow.
I touched on it yesterday in the newsletter. So yesterday being Monday. Basically, Monday's edition is like, there's nothing that produces dumber takes than the combination of nationalism, football, and a vacancy as the head coach of either England or the USMNT. Now, U.S. national team is a weird one because it is the most prestigious job and the best paid coaching job in the country. The MLS jobs are lesser, partly because MLS is still like very much in the early stages of that league. It's getting better. It has been getting better for quite a while. But the U.S. national team coach is a big thing. And in past times, they've had things like paying Jurgen Klinsmann somewhere between $3 and $6 million a year to be the champion and revolutionize U.S. national team players, but also coaching and standards and things like that. And for those who don't know, Klinsmann has been a quiet disaster in almost all the places that he's worked. Sometimes he's been a very loud disaster, but sometimes they tried to cover that up, given how much they paid him at the time. Most recently, he was in South Korea, and it was miserable for them as well. So I think people have stopped making that mistake. But he came out of that German national team side, looked like this incredible coach. He was a great player and a star. And then it turned out that he was a guy that didn't like to work very hard, loved to get paid a lot, was, attractive to put in front of people, but like did not have good tactical takes almost at all.
Yeah. Everything I've ever heard Klinsmann say, look, we did say that with this newsletter that we were going to say when your director of football should be sacked. Everything that I hear Klinsmann say, I think this man is a simpleton. And maybe he isn't, but he certainly talks like one in public. I would not want to hitch the future of my international federation to his ideas, I've got to say.
That only happened for 5 or 6 years. Not a big deal.
Oh, it's fine, yeah.
Moving on to so this is like past history of insanity. There's a long history of insanity in this. It's not like the media is being particularly weird in being insane about this, because the national federations themselves have often been insane about this. Like Gareth Southgate was not a particularly fancied name that happened to end up as a head coach of the English national team. And I think the fairest criticism of Southgate, which isn't criticism, is like really weighing up his record, is basically he coached to the level of the talent. Now, he didn't do it in a particularly attractive way, especially in the knockout tournaments, but you don't have to do that. He's not the only one that has done that. Deschamps over in France is continuing to do that. And honestly, I think the French must love their football fans to be miserable, because that is the only way that you could take that national team and produce that type of that talent level that is basically 3 first teams deep. Everybody else in the world looks over there and they're like, it's you guys in Spain. Like Germany are a million miles behind. England are at least a couple of lengths behind. And you guys have just the most obscene talent. And you just don't let them attack ever. That's just that attacking is not for us. Baguettes, cheese, defense. That's what we do. So anyway, Southgate coaches largely I'm going to get in so much trouble.
Do they do defense? That's more what I was thinking. But
are we talking about in geopolitics, or are we talking about...
This is where I'm going with this. We should probably shy away from this. Yes,
Speaking,
okay, continue.
Going back to the United States. That's a good segue, isn't it? Do they do defense? Yeah, it depends on who's president. So I was writing this piece talking about how insane everything is, and the U.S. national team, and media around it has taken it like 3 levels above the insanity around the England national team. England mostly needs a head coach that can, coach them to play solidly in defense, can coach set pieces, which is kind of a big thing for knockout tournaments, and can manage like a lot of the egos and the press, right? And the English press is probably the worst part about that job. Which wouldn't possibly keep any of the other brilliant managers away from it. No, never. That would not happen. United States national team is a thing where like they don't know who their next head coach should be. The guy that they sort of thought might be the best one, probably the best American coach right now coaches for Canada, who may have better talent than the United States. And he's probably a little bit gleeful about the fact that they outperformed them in Copa America and is like, well, you didn't choose me. I've been waiting for this job for like 8 years. Since you appointed Bruce Arena for like the second or the third time, that worked out great. So like, I'm going to go coach Canada for a while. Yeah, the weather's not as good, but the talent might be a little more successful. And we're going to go into a World Cup and see what happens there. So Jesse Marsch is out. And then you're like, all right, who's there? And like Thierry Henry has been floated. Thierry Henry has succeeded absolutely nowhere as a coach, right? One of the most brilliant footballers of all time has done nothing successful as a coach and probably still has this enormous learning journey to happen. Then you get a series of names that may be good, probably are not particularly experienced. Steve Cherundolo over at LAFC, I think is pretty well regarded, but he's like 3 years into his head coach journey. Wilfried Nancy, who's at Columbus, also very, very early in that journey. He's a Frenchman, but happens to coach in Columbus, which is like barely knows any French. So then you get like down into the third tier of names. And those third tier of names have some level of, yeah, that's never happening. But then there was one that I was just like, please, God, don't do that. And the reason why is his reputation in the media versus the way his teams actually play are so far apart that I had to comment on it because I was just like, please don't make me watch this as an American who actually kind of wants the national team to succeed.
Yeah.
How much Huddersfield did you watch back in like a 3-year period?
Too much. The same amount everybody else did, which was more than I should have. I mean, but David Wagner has that thing. Having a loose association with Jurgen Klopp has become it's like being a Kennedy, where you can apparently just ride it into whatever job you want for the rest of your career.
You're saying he's going to be a future candidate for president?
I'm saying that he could be like political editor for Vogue.
Interesting. Is he fashionable enough for that?
A minor Kennedy just got appointed to that role.
Look, the Kennedys are more fashionable, I think, than David Wagner. And more fashionable for this role in particular. My conclusion around this was that Wagner is allegedly from the Jurgen Klopp school. Like the journalists in the Guardian described him as being part of Jurgen Klopp's heavy metal football. And, known for high pressing and this side. Klopp's teams are. David Wagner's teams look nothing like that. And we watched him come up with a Huddersfield team that was one of the 2 luckiest teams that I've seen in the championship in the last decade. Came up facing Reading, who was also fucking terrible, but happened to be in the 3rd, 4th place team in a weird championship year. So that saved us from the Jaap Stam vertical trajectory of his career. And they played nothing like that in the times when he had good talent. Or at least equivalent talent to the league. They didn't play rock and roll at any point. He goes up, they shell the entire time. They sacked into an extra year in the Premier League. Okay, great. Luck happens, right? But at some point you have to watch the football that they play. And his teams have never been high press, aggressive teams, nor have they been particularly successful. And yet this is a guy that is being pitched as, the head coach of the United States team. That first of all, they don't know what their identity is these days. Like they're not sure if their talent's particularly good. You definitely don't want the US to have a legacy or a decade of playing David Wagner type football. That's fucking terrible for everybody involved. Like just don't do this to your fans. But the bigger thing is stop writing about David Wagner as a Jurgen Klopp type coach. He was at Dortmund at the same time, but otherwise they don't share anything.
But nobody wants to watch football, Ted. Like,
right.
It's better just to look at his Wikipedia and spin that into an article for The Guardian.
I think maybe the current generation, you play FIFA or EAFC, you play Football Manager, you talk about football online, and you watch the highlights. Maybe that's the extent of it. Actually watching football is a step too far.
That's what I do, though, except instead of playing FIFA, I just look at spreadsheets.
That was a little too close to home. I'm in this image and I don't want to be.
Yeah, it's been 10 years. I should have realized that you'd have PTSD about that. Okay. I agree. Look, this is an unkind thing to do to Americans. I don't think that they can handle this in addition to everything else right now.